I'm very pleased to introduce Shavon Haynes. Shavon is the Jackson County Water Master and works for the Oregon Water Resources Department. Shavon, thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to join us.
Well, I just wanted to thank everybody for allowing me to participate today. And just a little background, my name is Shavon Haynes. I am the Water Master. I work for the Oregon Water Resources Department. So the area that I get to work in is called District 13, which pretty much just covers Jackson County. So I'm often referred to as the Jackson County Water Master. However, I am a state employee. It's just the county is where is my field area. So the agency I work for, the Oregon Water Resources Department, agency that's in charge of kind of managing the water within the states. Talk about the waters of the states. That includes, surface water, so any water that flows on the surface, as rivers, creeks, reservoirs, as well as groundwater. And groundwater, technically, it's any water that's below the land surface. So that'd be like sumps, or most commonly referred to as any water that be access via a well. So as a water master, historically, our jobs were we dealt with water distribution and water use. Anytime somebody is using water, they need to have a water right, and that water right, that certificate, describes what uses that water can be used for, where that water can be applied to, how much they can use, and what's really important is a priority date. That priority date is given to a water right once that water right application has been submitted to the department. So as soon as it's received to the department, it gets a stamp, priority date. That's very important. Mostly because in times of shortage, like exactly what we've been experiencing over the last few years. In times of shortage, those folks with those older water rights, if there's not enough water, they give me a call, and it's my job to go out and kind of validate the call, verify that there's not enough water to satisfy the water right. Then I have to go upstream of those locations and identify, find water users that are using water that don't have a water right, or water users that may be taking more water than they should.
Hey, Shavon, really quick. This is Amanda here. It looks like your screen, your shared screen, isn't advancing. Have you changed slides at all?
No, I haven't. I was just doing a quick update of
okay,
stuff.
So sorry. Someone.
No problem. But thank you. So where was I? Oh yeah, and if there's not enough water to satisfy those water users, then it's my unfortunate job to go out and actually turn off water users that would have a junior or a younger priority date to those water users that have those older water. Historically, that was the majority of our job that we did as water masters, is just that water distribution aspect of it. More recently, we've been involved in more like community talks about, water use, water rights, those kinds of things. But a lot of our work has been focused on unauthorized water use. That's what's really been taking a lot of our time, a lot of the interest, and I guess because that's mostly what folks are wanting to know. Who has water rights, who's not using water rights, and what kind of enforcement actions are taking place with those individuals that don't have water. That's kind of what we've been really focused on a lot as of late, is locations that don't have water rights, getting those folks into compliance, be it helping them go through the water right process or turning off that water use altogether. Now we'll go to the next slide. All right, so I was just going to take a little bit to go over some of the water supply information that we have. Many of these slides may seem very similar to what you've just seen, so I'll go through these fairly quick. So currently this image here is showing the water supply outlook for the Rogue Basin. The information here is gathered through many different co-op agencies, and the water department, irrigation districts, and other volunteers. And so what this is showing is what we call our snow water equivalent, or what people refer to as the snowpack. Currently, what this is showing on the image with that red line is the Rogue Basin is definitely below what is normal for this time of year. Snowpack right now is 44% of median, which unfortunately is lower than it was last month when it was 74% of that. The precipitation from March was 46% of median, which is a little bit lower, actually significantly lower than it was at this point. Overall reservoir storage is definitely below. Right now, it's looking at, probably the easiest one to look at, what people are really noticing, is that of Immigrant Lake and Fish Lake. So here's a similar image that was shown before. This is the teacup diagram showing the reservoir storage for the Army Corps projects, such as Applegate Lake and Lost Creek Reservoir. Lost Creek Reservoir right now is at 56% of average, 56% full, and 38 feet below where the fill curve is. And Applegate is 41 feet below the fill curve. And here's just showing the fill curve that I was referring to. So the red line is like the water control diagram. So that's the maximum amount of elevation at which the pools should be throughout the year. And so the top image is showing where we're at with Lost Creek, and the bottom image is what we have for the Applegate. It's a very similar image that was shown before. This is another teacup diagram showing the reservoir storage for many of the reservoirs that supply water for many of the irrigation districts. And these three irrigation districts I'm referring to is Allen Irrigation District, Medford Irrigation District, and Rogue River Valley Irrigation. The one shining moment, or the thing to stand out on this one, is Agate Reservoir. That is full right now, while the other reservoirs are quite a bit behind. One thing to kind of keep in mind is most of those reservoirs are at a pretty high elevation, so they really rely on the rainfall and the snowmelt to fill. Whereas Agate Reservoir, that fills specifically from diversion from the Dry Creek flows directly into Agate Reservoir, and they're also able to divert water out of Little Butte Creek to fill as well. So it's kind of really showing that, the reservoirs that are really lacking this time of year are the ones that are in these higher elevations that really depend on that snowmelt and fall to fill. So just another image that's kind of showing us where we're at with these Bureau of Reclamation projects, which are mostly the projects or reservoirs that irrigation districts utilize, showing February and March totals, and I circled the Rogue Basin there, and how actually from February to March we actually lost water in these systems. Really didn't get hardly any precipitation through. So it's kind of showing that kind of really stressing the fact that these reservoirs are in poor state at the moment. So this is a couple hydrographs of a stream where my agency has a near real-time stream gauge. And so what this gauge does is it measures the stream flow in a near real-time format. It collects information every 15 minutes, and then once an hour, that information is transmitted to a platform where a web page is updated, so we can see changes in the creek on a real-time basis. We have roughly 39 of these sites that my agency operates throughout Jackson County. Most all of these sites are at locations that are they're at locations where there's no other water use upstream of these locations. So we get a kind of good idea of what does an uncontrolled or undiverted system look like. And also they're at locations where we may have we call an in-stream water right to help monitor how much water is supposed to stay in these. Also, gauges above and below, major irrigation diversions. So we can see how much water is left in the system directly right after or before large diversions take water. This one I'm showing here is on Evans Creek. The reason why I'm showing this one is because Evans Creek is a system that we regulate every year for some type of senior water use priority. The image on the top is showing the stream flow for 2022 in the month of March, and the bottom is the same one around the same time during the month of March, but for 2021. And you can see the flow this year during the month of March was around 30 CFS, and the one on the bottom showing it around 100 CFS, definitely showing a significant decline in base stream flow values. Same thing here, another stream gauge we have on Little Butte Creek. Once again, the image on the top is 2022 flows, and the bottom is 2021. Really showing that, that lack of stream flow. The drought monitor, very similar to the image that was shown in the previous presentation, showing that most of Oregon is in some stage of a drought. There in Jackson County, it's showing a D4, which is considered an extreme drought conditions. So when there are these extreme drought conditions, county commissioners with input and from stakeholder groups and or other natural resource agencies can request a drought declaration from the governor of Oregon. So this map here is showing the counties that actually did declare or request a drought declaration from the governor, and showing that Jackson County did request it and the governor has granted it. So last week, I believe she signed the order on 7th of April, did declare Jackson County a state of emergency for a drought declaration. A lot of folks want to know, what does that, in essence, what does that do? And so what it really does is it opens up different resources to be available for water users that are impacted by a drought. And specifically for the Oregon Water Resources Department, it kind of loosens up our water right processes to allow folks to be able to, potentially obtain a different water right temporarily to offset some impacts by a drought. And some of those processes include a temporary emergency water use permit. Let's say somebody had a surface water right, but as we're in drought conditions, that there's no water available or the water's not there for that water right, they can potentially, apply and get a water right temporarily from a well to kind of offset the impact of that drought. It's not a permanent water right, but it's only intended to be used during that drought season. And these new applications or these processes do go through a review process. However, it's not quite as in-depth, and they are intended to be a more streamlined process to find resources for those folks that really need it. Some folks can go through a temporary transfer, meaning that if they have water rights that might have an old priority date on one land and they wish to move it from one part of their property to another, there's a more streamlined process for folks to be able to go ahead and do that. Folks can also do a temporary lease, meaning that if they know they're not going to use their water right that year, they can temporarily leave that water in stream and kind of convert it from an irrigation to in stream. And also can potentially give priority for human consumption and stock water. If the Water Resources Commission chooses to do so, they can remove the priority for regulation on water rights that are for livestock and human consumption. Even though they may have a junior water right and historically subject to regulation because of the drought, that regulation need may be. So one thing I just wanted to highlight also is, some of the most recent legislation. House Bill 4061 was a bill that was passed for cannabis and water enforcement. Was passed through this most recent court session. It goes into effect June 3rd, 2022. And some of the things that will really help my agency folks that do water enforcement, some of the tools that they'll be able to have is when we issue a notice of violation, by rule, we have 5 days to issue that notice. And it may sound like a long time, but it really isn't, because that means, from when we first see the violation, back to the office, compile all of our paperwork, fill out the order, and then it must be reviewed by 3 other individuals before we can send that order. And that order has to be sent certified mail. So a 5-day time frame is really short in order to do so. Able to have a little longer time to. It also made it gave us some tools to help enforce some water hauling issues that we've been having for folks that are using hauled water in trucks. Either they filled up from a creek or a stream, or from a municipal distribution center. It gave us some tools and some more, teeth to do enforcement on those, because those are some things that would have been really difficult for my agency to. And increase some, criminal and civil penalties for water use. That is, so I feel really good about some of the things that was created because of this House bill to really give us some tools to be able to make the job a little easier. And so with that, that's kind of all I had. If there are any questions.